Ah, yes, I am fashionably late to the party, as per usual. But gosh darn it, I'm glad I showed up to the party eventually, because I haven't even built a PC in this case yet, but I have a very strong feeling this could go on to be one of my favorite budget cases of 2025. So if you have like no idea what I'm even talking about, let me fill you in real quick. So this is the Aqua 3 case. Now I haven't really made a video on a PC case in particular, but the second I unboxed this, I knew I was most likely going to love it. You can find this case on Amazon brand new, basically any day of the week. And I'm doing a PC build inside of it, which I'll have a much more in-depth video coming soon to the channel, so stay tuned for that. Now there were 3 pretty big reasons why I ended up wanting to go with this case for the build. And the first big reason why I decided to go with this case is the aesthetics, the way it looks. All right, now fish tank cases have kind of been a thing for like the past year or so. If you are a bit confused about the term fish tank, by the way, a lot of computer cases have fans up on the front panel here. So it's like a mesh where fans can intake air. Fish tank builds don't really do that. They have glass here and here to more just openly display the parts inside of them, making it look like a fish tank. Some of the most popular cases over the past few years are like the 011 Dynamic. I think that's the one that basically started the whole trend. We got like the Height Y60, Height Y70, and the way it is with the glass panel on the front, on the side, it basically just looks like an art piece, like perfectly and beautifully displaying the array of parts you have inside of it. And the Okanos obviously isn't the first to capture this kind of aesthetic, because there is a big difference with the style of fish tank case that this is compared to something like the 011 or Height Y70 or those kind of cases, because those cases are something we call dual channel cases, basically meaning the whole front area here is completely open, while there is much more depth in the back here for all your cables and the power supply. Basically, there's no power supply basement. There's literally just a second chamber back here. The problem I have with that is how thick it is, right? The Okanos doesn't exactly do that though. It's not dual chambered, so it has that fish tank vibe to it, but also still has that PSU basement to make it slimmer, which also goes along with the aesthetics and is like the first thing I noticed when taking it out of the box is the size of this case and how absolutely small it is, which is not a bad thing. I am all about this, in fact. So this case does support up to micro ATX motherboards. You won't be able to put anything bigger than that in there. For me personally though, and this, again, this might just be me, I really like the size of micro ATX. Like for me, ATX is just kind of like for your standard computer, I feel like it's a bit too big. That really isn't a problem with this case because again, it's so small, because especially with just how thin it is and how short it is. I mean, it's kind of crazy how small they're able to get this. And I think this is just perfect the way they were able to pull this off. I mean, imagine this filled up with parts is just going to maximize the amount of space in there. It's going to make it look so just full and it's not going to basically, there's not going to be empty space. You know, it's not going to feel like anything is missing, which is one thing that I absolutely love. Also with that, it's also a lot lighter than I was expecting. Like obviously it's full metal and tempered glass and everything, but it's still very light for what it is. Along with the aesthetics I want to mention, by the way, is the front IO. As you're going to notice, it's on this side, while a lot of PCs either have it on top or on the front here. And personally, I think having it on the side here just makes a lot of sense. But the second biggest reason why I ended up going with this case are the amount of features that it has. When picking out a case for a gaming PC, one of the biggest things that I look into are pre-installed fans. Pre-installed fans are probably one of the most crucial things because it can be really annoying to buy separate fans and have to wire that in, and then you realize you need a RGB hub or a fan hub or something, which is why I love to find cases like this that have pre-installed fans as well as things like an RGB or fan hub in the back, which this case has both of. In fact, it has 3 ARGB fans. The fans are also daisy chainable, so you're gonna notice all of them are connected together and then plugged into that RGB hub. And of course, you can add more RGB products to it as well, like a CPU cooler or something like that. This case also has great things like onboard USB Type-C support as well. So you see we have that in this front IO as well for USB Type-C. It still seems to have quite a bit of room in the back for cable management. It seems to have quite a bit of depth, even though it's not dual chambered. I don't think I gotta worry really about space. I think we should be, with a decent enough cable management job, I think it should be okay. I'm actually gonna take off the side panel here for a second, because if you've seen a few of my videos, you've probably heard me talk about fan orientation, right? And with fan orientation, it's a bit interesting. For most PC cases, you want a nice equal number of intake as well as exhaust fans. So intake fans basically pulling in air into the case, and then the exhaust fan should be taking that air, circling it around and throwing it outside the case to continue that constant circulation of air. Now this case is a bit interesting, and it's kind of what threw me off at first. You're gonna notice this case does not have any intake fans. In fact, it hardly has any place for intake fans at that. So it has 3 pre-installed fans, 2 at the top here set to exhaust, obviously, and 1 at the back here, also set to exhaust. This is actually intentional, and it serves a purpose. Supposedly, this case is maximizing the negative pressure and using it for its own benefit. So you're gonna notice the entire PSU basement here is all mesh, and air is able to very easily flow through here, as well as the bottom here is also all mesh. So basically the way this is supposed to work is basically using negative pressure to suck in outside air up through the top of the case as well. And of course, when it gets up to here as well, this fan in the back will be able to push it outwards, rushing all that air past your components and keeping them cool. And remember as well, you have a graphics card here as well with fans, I'm assuming, which will also be propelling the air upwards towards the exhaust fan, which I'm gonna be honest, I am questioning this a lot and I would love to see how it actually performs. And the final reason why I decided to go with this case and why I wanna recommend it is because of the price. Currently on Amazon, brand new, this case goes for $65. Yeah, you heard that right, under $70 for all of this, which is fantastic because you're getting the features, the aesthetics, the pre-installed fans, the controllers, as well as everything else I've mentioned for under $70. And this might be one of the best priced cases on Amazon, especially for things like PC flipping or just your own personal build if you're trying to go for a more budget build. Like I'm using this for an $850 build. You could very easily use it for like a $600 build. With that being said, I really want to say this is by far the best price performance PC case. Go buy it right now for your next build. But instead of doing that, I want to confirm it for real. And I have all the parts I need for this $850 PC. So we're actually going to go ahead, build that, throw all the parts inside this case. I also want to test the temperatures and see how this method actually works so I can give my final thoughts on this case. Spoilers, I think it might be good. But let's jump into a PC build real quick. Alright, so we have completed a build inside this case. This whole PC is around an $850 budget, which again, I will be making a more in-depth video on coming later, probably in February, so definitely stay tuned for that. But now having actually built in this case, I do have a few thoughts on it I want to cover. Overall, my building experience with this case was pretty smooth. I mean, everything fit the way it was supposed to, had enough clearance for all cable extensions, you know, there was no like size issues, even though this is a pretty small case. All 3 RGB fans in this case are already daisy chained together and connected to the RGB controller in the back. Only thing I had to do in terms of that was plug in the RGB controller for this cooler up here, for the cooler itself and the fan, obviously. Which again just plugs right into the back, and then 1 cable from the 3 daisy chain fans into the motherboard fan header, and then all of them are just pretty good to go at that point. I also forgot if I mentioned some of the features of the I/O in the front here, which aesthetically, again, I think looks really nice. But this case does have onboard USB Type-C as well as USB 3.0, and with the controller in the back, it also allows you to use the reset switch to simply change the color of the fans. There are a few effects here that you can go with as well. So you have RGB rainbow puke, and you have a few other fading effects here. It does look a bit choppy, but it's not really that bad. I mean, if you like the effects, you can. It's not really, there's only a few. I've definitely seen cases with a lot more options, but there may or may not be a software to control it. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't done a whole lot of research into actual software. In terms of cable management in the back, I definitely didn't feel like I was running out of space. I mean, I've dealt with these micro ATX cases before. You don't have the most amount of space in the world. I mean, it's not comparable to anything like a dual chambered case. Obviously, you're gonna have a lot more space and that kind of thing. But having worked with like a few of these cases in the past, I would say the cable management space in the back, like no complaints about cable management in the back. You know, I think there's definitely enough room for what you need. Like cable extensions are a bit bulky, so you have to take that into account. I cable manage as much as I can, but of course, since I did use a modular power supply, there's just a certain amount of cables that you're just not going to use, but can't detach from the power supply. And then everything else just gets crammed back into the PSU basement as much as possible, so you don't have to deal with it. I didn't really mention this before because I don't really use hard drives or SSDs, but when building it, you can see that there's plenty of space for hard drives. I think there's like 2 or 3 slots in the PSU basement that you can throw those in, which is great. The cutouts for cables are pretty standard, but I didn't run into any issues with those. Again, clearance with everything was fine, even with this motherboard. Another thing aesthetically as well, which is one thing that, like, when I saw this case, I was like, I'm pretty sure the parts are going to fill it out really well, because when I build a PC, I really don't like there to be empty, like, unused space, because then it feels kind of useless for it to be that big, which is one reason why I more gravitate toward these micro ATX form factors. This is a dual fan card. I don't know, and well, okay, it's a dual fan card. You can see how much it has filled out the case, so I don't really know how well a triple fan card would do in here. I think it would be fine depending on the model, but that's something I would just double check, especially with a case this size. I do also want to compare this case to 2 other micro ATX cases I've used in my past 2 videos, that being the Montec Air 100 and the Bitphoenix Nova Mesh ARGB. They're great cases and everything. The building experience wasn't as smooth as this. I do think I've had just a much more pleasant experience with this, but that might just be because I've gotten better at building computers. But there were just simple things, like the standoffs would occasionally come loose, and I had to take out the motherboard and kind of retighten those. It happened with like those cases, but not with these. But again, just comparing the building experience, this really just was straight to the point, smooth, took me under 2 hours. My only other little concern, since I talked about the airflow system of this with the negative pressure, because the whole negative pressure thing really hinges on the mesh all across the PSU basement and on top of the PSU basement for the fans, or especially the GPU fans, to be able to pull air from outside, pull it all the way up, and then these fans can extracted out the top, right? That's the concept of this case. One thing I did want to note is, especially since I used a modular power supply, that had me just shoving all my unused cables in this PSU basement, and the PSU basement kind of filled up pretty quick, and so that definitely gave me a few doubts about how this airflow thing would actually work, because, you know, the PSU basement is a lot more full. There's a lot less room for air to get through. Again, I don't know how that would affect it, which is why I was very interested in testing this out in some benchmarks in some games, just to see how the airflow actually works, specifically about the graphics card though, since that's the thing that's like most exposed. It's pulling up air. It really needs that intake of air. But now, with all that being said, I am very curious how the temperatures are looking like for this case when we run it through some stress tests and games and things, specifically for the GPU and CPU as well. But let's dive into some of those right now. All right, so a bit of a live update here so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing with this. We have it booted up in Windows right now, where I have a GPU stress tester running at the moment. So the GPU is at 100% utilization. Firmware has been running for about like 10 minutes at this point, and the temperature has stayed pretty consistent around 50 to 55 degrees Celsius, which is actually really good for the GPU, especially at 100% utilization, which it doesn't get to all the time in gaming, but this is a pretty accurate representation. As well as, you know, after this, I'm gonna as well test the CPU to make sure that's stable. Same thing for the temperature as well, especially since we have that third-party cooler on there. And then I would also like to test it in some games, again with the consistency, the FPS, which is good for just testing any gaming PC, by the way. And I will dive into those benchmarks more thoroughly when I release that more in-depth video on the PC specifically. For now, we're focusing on temperatures and the case because of that negative airflow system that the Okanos case has going on for it. But as you can see from this, I don't think the negative pressure is having a negative impact on the PC's performance whatsoever. But let's jump into some games and see how it works out there as well. I'm only going to test a few games here, but starting out with Counter-Strike 2, we're running at all high settings, and the temperatures are pretty encouraging and consistent, with the GPU around 53 to 55 mark, and the CPU hovering around 63 degrees Celsius. Jumping into a newer title, Delta Force, in all medium settings for the GPU was getting around that 50 degrees Celsius mark, while the CPU was hovering around 60 degrees. In Hitman 3, however, the GPU was hovering around 55 to 60 degrees Celsius, while the CPU was around that 57 to 60 degree range as well. In all the other games I tested, the temperatures did stay pretty consistent around these numbers, but overall with our results, I see the airflow in this case is pretty encouraging. Overall, I'm actually pretty encouraged by the performance of this case in terms of the temperatures. I don't think it holds the computer back by any means. I think it honestly just does its job pretty well. But now, do I actually recommend this case? And in short, yeah, this thing is 65 bucks brand new on Amazon, basically every day of the week. Overall, I just think it is a fantastic option for that price. If you're going for that fish tank kind of look and you like the features that it has, the size, aesthetics, any other things with it, I think it is a fantastic option. You really can't go wrong with it. I also, should I mention this is not sponsored? Hang on. This feels like a sponsored video. It's not. All right, this is just a computer case that I bought for a video, and I want to put that out there right now. This is not sponsored. This is, again, a computer case that I bought for a video for a computer that I've been looking into, and I opened it up and I'm like, bang, this seems really cool, and I want to make actually a video looking into the case. Again, it's been very encouraging. I would recommend it, especially for things like flipping computers, making budget computers. It even works with some like higher end or mid-range to high-end parts as well. I mean, I don't see why not. Again, this video is not sponsored whatsoever. I've just decided to take a look at this case more in depth for myself to help you guys determine whether or not you would like to go with a case like this for a future build. A link for it will be in the description below, by the way. Also, once more, I will be making a much more in-depth video on this computer and the budget and the parts list and everything with more benchmarks and things like that. If you're interested in that, then please do consider subscribing to see exactly when that comes out. Also hit the thumbs up button because that helps with the YouTube algorithm. And comment down below if you have any suggestions, ideas, criticisms, whatever you want, or just comments about this case. Definitely leave those in below. I'd love to see what you guys actually think about that. And aside from that, we have another great video waiting for you right there, and I'll catch you on the next one.